City Skylines 2 has changed a lot over the past couple of years, and with all the new features and assets being added, it almost feels like a different game every time I log in. Today we're starting downtown, where I'm going to try and untangle some of the city's traffic using a few smart mods. Then we'll head out to Sunny Isle's historic coastline to build a bustling fishing harbour and a cosy township around the bay. Welcome back to Sunny Isle. Hi and welcome back to Sunny Isle, and we're down by this little town that we've started developing in the last episode. We've got the oil and cargo port just sitting neatly underneath this little cliff edge here. However, over here we've got a beautiful little bay which is crying out for some development, and I think given that this is quite a sheltered area and we've got lots of developable land, I think this is a really good opportunity to create a little bit of history in the area by building what I would say is quite an old-fashioned fishing town, which over time may have not been the most profitable and has now been developed into an industrial super hub. Before we can do anything in this area, I want to quickly jump into the main city and do some quick traffic fixes, since everything seems to have grinded to a halt. And stick around to the end because I've got some exciting news about what we're going to be doing over the course of 2026. Looking at Sunny Isle City, you would assume everything is running smoothly, but if we just pop up the UI, we can see we've got loads of issues. And a lot of these issues do stem from traffic. And with traffic, it means people are not able to go to school, go to work, or go to the shops. We're even having some issues picking up dead people. So I'm hoping with a few of these small fixes we do today should resolve some of these issues. And the main corridor of traffic through the city, since we've created a lot of friction near the coastal areas because we don't want traffic going through where people want to enjoy themselves and go to the shops, we've moved it all the way out here to this kind of relief road. This is the Phoenix Bridge Road, currently called Blackthorn Street. Thank you very much, City Skylines 2, for your great naming mechanism. And then up here we've got Phoenix Bridge, which crosses over the river, over the train station, and then down to the big roundabout entrance that leads into different parts of the island. Down here we've got a mix of roads. We've got this 2-3 lane road, then we've got this 4-lane road, and at the moment it's a little bit of a mess. We don't have any traffic signals set up, and I can see this is a little bit of a traffic hotspot. People are struggling to get out of the side streets. We've got cyclists just waiting in the middle of the road. We've got pedestrians running across, and as the city is becoming more dense and more busy, I think it is worth putting in some traffic lights here. Okay, zooming out, we can see that this 3-lane road extends all the way down to this little intersection here. Let's go ahead and just use the vanilla 4-lane road with a divide in the middle. Let's use the upgrade tool. We're going to use Anarchy so that we don't destroy anything along here, and we'll just extend that all the way up here. Lovely. And I think that is good. We've got some trees that we've placed with Anarchy, but they don't appear to be in the road. We can move them over because they do seem to be a little bit off center now. But with all this extra capacity through here, we certainly do need to add those traffic lights in. So let's just click that into place. And we've got the vanilla one set up at the moment. And we could use the traffic light enhancement tool to adjust this. Let's have a look at the road connections first. So let's go to the lane connector tool with the traffic mod. Let's turn this on, and I'm going to remove the U-turns, and let's just remove any of the unsafe turns as well. And we want to allow people to go straight on here if they want, and they should be able to turn right as well. And then I want to see if they can go in every direction. Now, I could connect both of these lanes up, but I don't think it's necessary because they can merge onto the other lane if needed. So I'm actually going to remove the extra lanes here. I think I might restrict right turns here. Yeah, let's go ahead and do that. Because if anyone needs to go down these roads, they should find an alternative route, because at the moment this is quite a high capacity corridor, and I want the vehicles that are going straight on to go through without any conflict. And I think if we do that, we don't necessarily need to set up any custom traffic lights, because it should be efficient enough to get people in and out. So let's just jump into cinematic mode and jump into speed 3 and see if this is functioning or not. All right, hold your horses. I can see people are doing some weird turnaround things up on Highland Street. So I'm going to go into the lane connector mode again, and let's select this little junction. Let's turn off the U-turns. And I think there was a little one here as well, and I've seen people going over the grass. So let's make sure that there's no weird connections through here. And I think that has resolved all our issues here. Lovely. Okay, well, since we've got quite a lot of development here now, in terms of road infrastructure, we've got a couple of bus stops as well. So there's reasonable public transport infrastructure, and then you are pretty close to the city. There's a little footpath that cuts through to this little estate here. You've got access to the schools. To me, it doesn't really make sense to have all this low density here, but I'm not one to completely redevelop the city all in one go. I quite like to see things gradually change. So these two people, while the roads were getting changed, I imagine maybe they sold up and they've allowed developers to come in. So let's go ahead and remove these here. And remove those buildings. Now, can we zone something? So the zoning has connected up to Heather Street at the top there. So let's just quickly drag a pedestrian path through the back here, block that zoning off, and then that gives us a nice clean grid. And I quite like the look of these Chinese medium housing units. So we'll put a little bit of a 2x4 in there. And while we wait for that to grow in, we've got a little bit of a slither on this side here. And I've downloaded some new parking assets from PDX mods. And there's a few nice assets through here that will fit into a 1x4 area. So we've got a 1x4 single row of parking. And this one comes with a little bit of a fence as well, which is quite nice. It kind of encloses the area. And that fits in nicely there. That provides a bit more capacity to the people living in what will be quite a tall building, I imagine. And on this corner, we've got some commercial. So we've got a building here that is currently selling petrochemicals, because who doesn't need petrochemicals in a downtown city like Sunny Isle? But on this corner, I've also got another asset from the PDX mod store, which I think it's just ploppable. So I'm going to search for JP. It's a Japanese asset, really nice looking little thing. It's the 7-Eleven, super cozy little thing. And we'll just plop that down there. This is tiny little asset, but it's so well made. I think we need to use move it just to bring it down to the ground. I think it's attaching itself to the pavement over here, but the alley road is actually a little bit shorter. But this is beautifully made, and we can put a couple of benches on this side, make use of that nice wall decoration there. And then over here, I think we can go ahead and put in a little bit of Japanese medium density housing. And I don't know if that's going to grow in because of the way the zoning works, but I think this is really nice. So let's go ahead and add a few of the last minute touches, a couple of benches and bushes, bring it all together, bring the building a little bit closer to the road. And then I think we've created such a cozy little corner that you could quite easily drive past and not notice. But for everybody that lives locally, it's a very convenient place to grab a snack, or maybe something that you're missing from your grocery shopping. So I think this is a great addition to this little corner of Sunny Isle. However, you can see we've got quite a big traffic issue still to battle. This area has just come together really nicely. We've got so much more density than what we had before. We had just a couple of those single family homes, but these assets kind of just fit the Sunny Isle vibe perfectly. They're modern, they're not old, they're just kind of neutral, a little bit of concrete, not too big as well. And the whole area is starting to just become a little bit more lively with these different heights, different buildings, and I'm quite happy with the result. What I'm not happy with though is this traffic. I know I started the episode off saying I wanted to do some traffic fixing, and it seems like we may have actually made things worse. But in fact, the road heading out of town on Phoenix Bridge Road is completely clear. So the congestion is clearly on the other side of the bridge. And you can see down by our big roundabout here, we've got a lot of issues happening. And I think it was maybe a couple of episodes ago, I tried to fix it just by adding 5 lanes all the way around to see if we can just increase capacity, increase movement through here. But if anything, I think that might have made it a little bit worse. So I'm going to go ahead and downgrade the road here. I think we'll stick to 4 lanes all the way around. And then I'm going to use the traffic lane connector tool. And we're going to go through and we're going to optimize the lane connections, because in circumstances like this, where you've got people on the roundabout, you don't necessarily want them to stay in the innermost lane, because as people move around the roundabout, they need to move to an outer lane until they reach the exit that they desire. So the way this is set up doesn't really make that much sense. So we've neglected it long enough, so we need to fix it up. I'm also going to try the traffic light enhancement mod. It got an update a couple of months ago where you can create traffic groups, and I'm going to see if we can automate some of the signals through here so that we have people moving through without as much hindrance. So we'll start by jumping into Road Builder. Let's use this road as a template and add an extra lane. I always like to rename these so that I can come back to them in the future, but I think the task is a little bit frivolous because I always seem to be creating new roads. Okay, let's go ahead and use this road and apply it all the way around the roundabout. We'll go for the 4 lanes. I think this is the most manageable and probably the most natural formation for the roundabout, given that there's 4 or 5 exits, so you don't really need that many lanes, especially when we've got quite a large gap between each exit. Some of these roads also have a footpath attached to them, so we do need to make a road builder variation with a footpath so that people can still navigate around the roundabout if they decide to walk through here. We also have the tram coming through the middle, which isn't going to be affected by today's work. And I'm really looking forward to extending that tram line in the future as we grow the area around this roundabout, make it a little bit more urban. And that's why I don't necessarily want to build a really large interchange, because I do want to create a human-centric or human-friendly area where people can walk without feeling like they're completely surrounded by concrete infrastructure. Now I'm using the traffic lane connector tool to fix some of these lane connections. At each entrance, we don't necessarily need all the lanes connecting to every other lane. We can leave some of them disconnected because people can merge into the other lanes along a segment, which is quite a nice feature for City Skylines 2, because you don't necessarily need to depend on nodes for people to change where they're going. However, it can be a little bit of a hindrance at times because you do get those last minute changes, especially at traffic lights. You'll see people cutting across 3 lanes of traffic, which can be quite frustrating. Although from my experience, especially driving in areas like London, people will do crazy things like that just to change their route, especially in areas that don't have good alternative paths and you have to take your exit, otherwise you'll be going the long way around. So continuing to go through this roundabout, fix up some of these lanes, making sure that there's good distribution of people continuing on the roundabout and those coming off. And I think for the most part, a lot of the vanilla configurations were okay. But if you really want something like this to work, you do need to nurture it. You do need to come through, test a few things out, and just watch it as it starts to operate, optimize it. It's not one of those things you can kind of just build and leave it alone. And that's similar to real life. You often see a lot of these large infrastructure projects redeveloped over time, especially as traffic volumes increase. And the big game changer for City Skylines 2 is the traffic light enhancement mod, where we can start to create traffic light groups. So I'm going to create the first group at the top here, which combines the tram intersection with one of the roundabout entrances. And then the second group will connect up to the roundabout and along Phoenix Bridge Road. This should, in theory, allow vehicles to travel through this corridor with as little friction as possible, easing congestion. Now, I'm putting a lot of faith into this mod because I'm not 100% sure how it works. It's a little bit of a black box. So I've enabled a couple of the settings, such as enable coordination and enable green wave. And speaking to Brucey Boyd, the mod developer, he suggested editing the leader traffic light phases so that you have a little bit more control over the timings of the group. So I'm having a look at the leader node, and instead of adjusting the timing of these phases, I'm going to use some of these pre-built filters that come with the mod. I'm going to use the heavy traffic filter, and that should allow traffic lights to stay on a little bit longer to allow a bit more throughput. And in my mind, that makes me think that the vehicles coming off Phoenix Bridge Road have plenty of time to make it down the road towards the roundabout and make their way through the interchange. Now, with all those changes in place, let's see if the plan of action is going to work. And so far, so good. Now, looking at the city overall, we are still seeing quite a lot of issues, especially with not enough customers. And that might just be a shockwave from the latest patch that we received. We need to let the simulation kind of work its way through what it needs to do. And hopefully these things will start to resolve themselves. But for now, let's head over to our new town and start to build out something new. Okay, so from above, we're going to start by extending out this harbour arm. My other build in this area is quite geometric, so for this one, we'll keep it fairly straightforward around the port itself. But as we come into the old harbour area, I'd like to create something that looks a little bit more organic. So we're going to play around with some of these curvy-wurvy roads and see if we can create something that just looks like it's been around for a long time and slowly added on to, and different businesses and different people have had their way with it and built something that's unique to this area, creating a sheltered cove for the community to live in. I started by extending a road out, and using the Anarchy tools, I forced the road to ground so that we can use the terrain tools to extend the land out a little bit. And with this extension, we could add our own buildings. We could even zone on this if we wanted to. However, I think most of this will be fishing industry. And at the end, I'd like to put a little bit of a lighthouse feature. With the lighthouse in place, this marks the entrance to our harbour. So let's add a couple of piers into the water to make the entrance a little bit more narrow, a little bit more protected. And let's make this look a little bit irregular as well. As I said, we want to make this look like it wasn't planned. It was more of a development that came over time. On the seaward side of the harbour, I'm going to bring the land out a little bit, use the soften tool to create a gentle slope, and then I'm going to be using these wave breakers that I found on PDX mods. These tetrapods are a pretty cool looking asset. They come in a set of 3, and using the line tool I can bring them along the shore here, and it creates quite a lovely effect. It's a little bit complex, probably a little bit more than what I'm used to doing, but the end result is worth it. For the rest of this harbour arm, I'm going to cover it in a concrete surface. I'm not sure if this will stick around, but it gives us a good idea of what the area looks like and what we can work with. And with the lighthouse asset, we've added this little cafe extension on. Although I don't think the grass and the bushes really make sense out here, so I'm using the bucket fill mod to replace some of the surfaces, extending it out, completely covering the whole harbour arm in a solid surface. With that tree out the way, we're going to start detailing this little area, bring in a fence across, and then we'll use the picker tool and select some of the props that are already in this asset, making the area feel a little bit larger, like the whole place is one development. On the other side of the fence, we're going to imagine this is a little bit of a disuse area, a little bit of storage. We're going to select just a few random industrial props and just make this area feel like it's in use, but it's not necessarily cared for. Somewhere you can store a few boxes, a few crates, whatever's needed at hand for the nearby industry. Whoa, look at this big accident. You got cars, caravans all over the place. You've got somebody here waiting for an ambulance just at the side of the road. Fortunately, not causing too much congestion. You've got cars coming through, and it looks like we've got an ambulance just about to arrive. Are you going to help this person? What's going to happen? And they just evaporate out of existence. Fair enough. And you've got a police car over there attending to the caravan. It looks like there's a few other things going on in the bushes. Fortunately, no bushfires because of the accident, which is great. And even if we did have a big backup along here, we do have this country road that kind of runs parallel and goes underneath the bridge here. So there's always a way around if, you know, an issue did arise. But let's have a look at the oil town and what progress we've made. And I started putting together this breakwater. We got this beautiful lighthouse which came with the Bridges and Ports DLC just on the end here, and I think this is a nice addition to the area. I think this is one of the landmark buildings, so we will get tourists heading out here, and in fact we've already got one visitor heading to the lighthouse to grab something to eat, I guess, because this is a cafe serving meals. That's quite nice having that out here because it means that people will come out here, use the facilities. We've got the pier on the end here. I decided to not go for a solid pier. I'd like to think that this was maybe an addition after they built the harbour arm to help larger boats come into the area without necessarily having to head into the harbour, which might be quite shallow. But I'm using these tetrapods. These are a bit of a pain to put down, but using the line tool you can quickly put them along the edge of the coast. And I think if you shape the land with the terrain tools beforehand, they're a little bit easier to use. These are created by TO Auditor, so check them out on PDX mods if you like the look of those. We've got a little bit of an awkward space at the top, which I might just turn into a little bit of a car park space, a late night spot to come and have a look at the boats. And then here we'll have some fishing. We'll have a look at the vanilla fishing assets. Now you might be saying, how are people accessing this area? Because we've got the port gate. Fortunately, the port gate doesn't stop people from traveling into your port. So I'd like to think maybe this is a more casual port space. Maybe there's some special instructions to make sure that they don't wander into any dangerous parts of the port. I'm not really worried about the logistics of that. I just quite like the idea of having these little structures out here to give the area a little bit of life. Over here we've got a little pier that sticks out, which we put together in the last episode. This is quite close to what will be the downtown area of this little town. So I wonder if we could play around with some of the ferries, and if we extend that out just a little bit on each side, but we might be able to just plop that on there. Yeah, there we go. That'd be quite nice because boats can come straight into the harbour, use all the space, and then we're going to connect it up to the main town. And we already have one stop on Mont Clementine at the end here, so that's currently shuttling between the main ferry terminal down to the end of this peninsula here. But eventually I do want it to connect up to a few places along the coast, but we can just go straight on and connect up to the oil town today and just improve it over time as we start to develop this coastline. So let's go ahead and grab the small boat seaway. Let's weave that through the harbour entrance, create a little bit of a turnaround as well, make use of some of this space, and then we'll extend that out all the way to Mont Clementine, make the path as direct as possible, and we'll extend the existing line that we've already got, recreate the stops at Mont Clementine. Initially I wanted to add Bad Peanut's custom ferry to this line, but unfortunately when this was built it wasn't available as a river ferry. Oh, look at this beauty. So when I first started building this new ferry line, I went ahead and tried to add this ferry from PDX Mods. This is by Bad Peanut. It was only available as a large ferry, the ones that you would use to connect off the map using the large ferry harbour. After reaching out to Bad Peanut, I said, please, 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 can we get this as a river ferry edition? And he did not disappoint. He delivered such a beautiful asset and he allows us to use it wherever we want. So this is now going to replace our coastal ferry going all the way around the island as we start to build all these little towns out. And I just love the animation on this. And it's quite interesting because some of these props, if you take a look at these little tables here, I think at some point I accidentally recolored the prop instance to be a different color long time ago, and it looks like that color has been applied to the props on this ferry, which is lovely because then you get a little bit of cohesion on this vehicle and what you see around the city, which is it's super interesting. Anyway, so happy to see that trotting along, and I'm sure that would be quite popular. I wonder if we've got anybody waiting. We do have quite a few people waiting. I'm quite surprised. I reckon they're mostly going to Mont Clementine. Doesn't in fact let me click on any of these, which is a little bit weird. I think I've got a load of decals underneath here which is blocking me, but yeah, pretty happy with that. Okay, so let's go ahead and stick that fishing industry in here. And you'll see that we do actually have some issues left unresolved. When I was putting this together, I used the boat pack that's on PDX mods. But after talking to a few other content and asset creators, it turns out that prop pack is highly unoptimized, with assets having a triangle count of over several million, which can affect the performance of your game. Now, I would say I didn't notice any change in performance because I did only use a few, but I imagine if you were to use more, and I imagine as we grow the island and use more and more custom assets, that it more than likely is going to become a problem. So I've unsubscribed from the asset pack and I'm going to remove these. And instead I've subscribed to Harbour Master J's boat pack, which comes with the Bridges and Ports DLC fishing industry boats. These are the type of things that he's got. Now this one's a little bit oversized for the area, but these small ones will be great. So we'll replace the ones that we've got here and just make this look a little bit nicer. Further inland, we're experiencing a little bit of traffic, especially at this main road running through the area. And I'd like to experiment with a highway viaduct that runs over this road. Now you might be thinking this isn't very good in terms of the aesthetic of the area, but remember this is an industrial town. So local planners have decided to build this raised highway running over the top of the main road. And in fact, locals don't mind too much because it does allow a little bit easier access between neighborhoods that would have previously been cut off by heavy traffic. The only downside now is this has become an efficient route for traffic to get into Sunny Isle. So local residents have to put up with noise and air pollution. Let me know if you know any places like this where you live, because I think it's a little bit more common than you think. And with city skylines, it's so easy to build desirable and green cities, but sometimes it needs to be a little bit gritty and a little bit ugly. So here's my attempt at doing something like that. On the other end of this viaduct, we're going to remove this road so that we can bring the highway down to ground level. And then we'll upgrade this road that connects to the waste management center. And this could be the main way into the town, which does have to cross over the train track. So there may be some backups here in the future. To overcome that, I think we might make use of a couple of roundabouts through here. Not make this too complicated because I imagine we might have to come back here in the future. Alright, let's have a quick look around the fishing industry area we've got now. I think they're starting to, well, I think it's in pretty good shape, to be honest. I've added a couple of Harbour Master J's little boat props that he's got down here. I really like the colour of these fishing boats that are heading out. And it's really good seeing them out on the open water. Got a couple of the prop versions over here. Now I don't know why these paths keep popping up, so I might replace them with a prop instead. But overall, it's looking really fun and really interesting. Now I didn't go overboard with the detail. You can achieve so much with just a few surfaces, just a couple of decals. And what I love about using fishing industry is you get these seagulls spawning in, and you can even hear them in the background. You've got seagulls on the road over here, and it just adds a lot of life to the city, to the build. You can see them flying around in the air, and we are getting quite a few visitors heading down here, especially those walking dogs. It doesn't surprise me. I would come down here with the dog and go grab a pint or whatever they've got available down here. Now we've got another one of those assets which I need to delete. We'll get rid of that. I think that's one of the boat stands I was using as a little bit of junk along here. All these little details, I mean the asset came with a lot of these details. I've just used the picker tool and extended what was available. All these little props here, they come with the asset, which is really nice. I'm pretty happy with the way this looks. Let's have a look at the industry main building. So it's currently coming up to level 2. It's got 101 efficiency. It's got a couple of issues. Similar to the last episode with a lot of the industries in the area, we do not have enough people on the island. That's why we're building the town out here, because we need to get some workers in. It just seems that I've been a bit distracted building places for people to work rather than places for people to live. But through here, everything seems to be looking good. We've got trucks heading out, making deliveries. We've got boats out on the water. The fishing area, there's a couple of fishing areas. There's one on the right side here and one on the left. And I just filled the space up as much as possible just so that we had a little bit of variety of where the boats could sail, so they're not all just squashed into a small area. Anyway, I started putting together this little peninsula thing here. It's a little bit wonky. We'll just set that node to that height. So we had the concrete pier out here, but again, I think we could add so much more detail if we play around with some of the networks, some of the buildings. And I'm going to borrow a hack that I saw in Kui's city. If you remember that build from last year, where he had these buildings hanging off the edge of the coastline, and it almost looked like they were floating on the water. Now, I had a closer inspection of how he did that, and it appears that if you go into buildings and let's turn on filters, specifically the northeast pack, and some of these row homes don't have a concrete base. I think these wooden ones are the ones that he was using. So if we have a quick look through here and place down a few of these, and we look at the back here, it does conform the terrain. But if we grab a network, this is a network that I created for another build in Road Builder. So it's a gravel network. It doesn't have any lanes on it. And then if we just drop that down to the ground, and in fact, we can use the topography tool to see what we're doing in move it mode, which was always difficult before. And we just drop that down, right down to the ground. And then we push this back. And you can see it starts to reveal the foundations of the building. And these buildings don't have a foundation. So what we can do then is go into our props, and Jay has, if we just clear all the filters, Jay has these little piers that we could use, which we could place along here. And maybe not this one. I think there's one that's without fences, but we'll just use this as an example. We're going to move it, and then we'll just drop this down to the same height as the base of those buildings. Where we bring that in, and again, we can bring that all the way down here. And you start to get this floating effect, which is fantastic. This is something I think has been missing from the game from the beginning. Buildings that can be both on land and on water. And I know we've got some of the ferry assets, but I would love to see residential assets like this too. So we're going to go and build out this little pier like this. And then I think over here, I would love to bring in that miniature town density, bring a road along the coast here. Now, this is quite a rugged area, so we're going to have to be careful with the types of buildings we place. Nothing that's got a large footprint. And we do have a little footpath that connects up to the roadhouse and then eventually down to South Bay. We can connect that up to the road and have a little bit of pedestrian walkway through the area. Okay, what another mega session that was, putting together this beautiful residential peninsula. That was so much fun, and just exploring all these different assets and all these new mods and new tools in the game. Since I've not been able to play as often as I like, I can say that I've really had so much fun putting this together, and I love seeing these results with the floating residential row homes on the end here. This beautiful little cafe that just looks out onto the harbour. Great place to watch the boats come in or watch the sunset. And then through here we've got all these different types of buildings that just completely cover up this hilly peninsula. Even using some of these new garage assets that are on PDX mods with a functional parking spot on the inside. And then all that just comes together to create such a cozy little place. And it does make me wonder, is this something that we want to continue through the build? Because it does take a lot of time, but I think it's worth it, especially in these awkward spaces. I still love to zone and I still like to expand quite quickly. But I think in these awkward areas, it is really worth taking the time to create something a little bit different. So I think when we come to the main city center here, especially along the coast, I do want to create something that feels unique and special to the area. But as we move out, I will probably rely more on typical zoning and regular gameplay, just so that we can fill this area out with a few more residents. And I think that's a good balance when playing Cities Skylines 2, because it's quite easy to burn out when you spend a lot of time detailing things. And I think it's okay to have less detailed areas alongside more detailed areas. And you can play the game however you like, because there's no rules to this genre of city building. And it seems like everybody has a different way of playing. And that's what I really enjoy about watching everybody's builds on YouTube, as well as seeing all your screenshots on Discord and Reddit. Now for some exciting news. Either at the time of this video or shortly after, myself and a bunch of other creators have been invited by Paradox to go to Stockholm to meet Iceflake Studio and talk about the future of Cities Skylines 2. The Creators Connect event has happened before, and I'm extremely fortunate to be invited this time around. So if you've got anything that you'd like me to share or to find out while I'm in Stockholm, please leave a comment down below and I'll try my best to see if I can get some answers. And thank you again for checking out the city and the series and supporting the channel. I'll see you next time. Goodbye.